Hey everyone, how's it going today? Hope you guys are having an awesome day today. So, what we want to go over today is circuits. I know that circuits can be a very daunting task, especially, and we're going to talk about this, especially when it comes to automating cargo rockets and sending them, deciding when to send them, deciding when not to send them, especially. That's very important. And then also deciding what to load and what not to load. But before we do that, I want to give a quick overview of circuits for those of you who might not know very much about them, which is totally fine. So basically, the circuits are very easy ways to read values of different things. Now, I'm going to demonstrate what I mean by that. One easy thing that you can do is you can connect up a wire, and it really doesn't matter if you use green or red. Both will do the trick. But just be careful because green and red wires can carry different values, and you might want to make sure that they're not overlapping too much. So you always got to be a little bit careful with that. So for instance, what I can do is I can take a green wire and I can hook it up to, let's say, this electric pole. So this is going to read the contents of what is inside this container. And you can see here, if you look over to the right, there's a little green symbol with 33 sand, and that is exactly how much sand is in this. And you can see over here that once I've connected it, I get this little box that says circuit connection. It has a network ID, and you can also see the signals here if you mouse over this. And then it'll have a mode of operation. Here, there's only one mode, which is read the contents, but in other things, there'll be other modes, which I will show here shortly. So the easiest way to show the signals is just to connect it to a power pole so that you can quickly mouse over it and see. And if we do the exact same thing with red signals, you'll notice that now it has kind of a little red tinge to it, and you can see that both wires have the same value since they're only reading from this one box. And of course we've got all these bots here charging, so they're kind of loud, but whatever. There are a lot of other things that you can do. So for instance, something else you can do is you can read the value of how much electricity is stored in an accumulator. So if you just connect this up, you can see there is a value A, and that value is 100 because this is fully charged. And you'll see here that we could change this to a different signal if we wanted it to output a different signal. And again, different mode of operation, it's read charge level. So that's pretty cool. There are other interesting things that you can do, like connecting up to a train stop, and there are lots of modes of operation here. So you can read train count, so as you can see, the number of trains going to this particular train stop, whether there's a stopped train at the stop or not, the contents of said train. You can automate setting the train limit, right? So this has enable train limit, and this would set the train limit, and you could decide based off of different factors what that limit is. Whether you're going to turn the stop on or off, right? And then this would send the contents of the circuit network to the train so they can be used for wait conditions. So like if there's a train waiting for this stop, you'd be able to use this as well. So there are lots of things you can do there. Now, one of the more powerful ways that you can do this is by reading everything that is inside of your circuit network. So right now, you can see here, if I do an overlay, I have a very big circuit network that has hundreds of thousands of items in it, okay? And so I might want to look at the values of certain parts of those items. So what we can do is we can have a roboport that we just connect up to an electric pole. And you can see here, I can't even read all of the values of all the things that are in this network, right? So you can see that off to the right, there's a huge set of signals. And if we look here, there are two different modes of operations. One is read logistic network contents. This is the default mode. You can also do read robot statistics. So if we switch this, you'll notice that instead of all those values, there are Y, X, T, and Z. And these are all for different construction versus logistic bot counts. And obviously they're fluctuating as bots receive different orders and things like that. But you can use this to regulate the amount of bots that you want in your network. So as I was saying, this read logistic network contents, it is the default, and it is a very easy way to read different values. And that's going to be super important when you're dealing with your cargo rockets, okay? So that's a quick overview. The only other thing that we can talk about are the different combinators. So we have constant combinators, we have decider combinators, and we have arithmetic combinators. All of them do slightly different things. Let's start with the constant combinator. Constant combinator is going to output signals that you determined beforehand. So we can just come in here and we can literally select anything we want. And let's just say that we're wanting to request vulcanite blocks, okay? So we can say we want 100 vulcanite blocks as this signal that this is outputting. And if we connect this constant combinator up to this electric pole, you'll see that it's outputting those 100 blocks that we just set. And we can add more things. Let's say we want some cryonite rods, okay? Now you can see that there are also 100 cryonite rods as the output, okay? So that's very important because you can use these things to like set levels of different, things like that. So for instance, okay, and we'll talk about this here shortly, but if we come up to our orbit, I have a couple constant combinators up here, and you can see that they're sitting right here, that have the values of all of the items that I want in outer space. So they're the things that I want delivered up here. And you can see that I have the values of all of them set in here. So they're basically getting sent back to Novice, and Novice is saying, hey, what values of things do we need up there? And then it's figuring out with some math what is needed. And I'll explain that here shortly. So that's just one way that constant combinators can be used. Decider combinators are a little bit different, and we'll get rid of this. So again, we're going to use this constant combinator here, okay? And you can see here, if you mouse over the decider combinator, you can see the input signals, okay? And we're going to hook up the output here to our electric pole. Now you can see by default nothing is happening, but if we come in here, we can basically figure out what we want to do based off of different counts. So in this case, let's say, right, if vulcanite blocks are less than 200, right? Okay, and again, we have a signal coming in from here that is 100, okay? So it is going to be less than 200. Then we're going to output, let's say, a vulcanite block. And you can see here that that one vulcanite block is being output. You could also choose the input count, and you would see the input count being output, okay? Now, however, if we say greater than 200, right, but we only have 100 here, you would see that it is not going to be outputting anything. Now, this is a little bit contrived since we're using a constant combinator, but let's say that you were trying to decide something based off of what was in your network. We could instead hook this up, right, to this, and now we have a ton. We have 18,000 vulcanite blocks here, and you can see in our output, there are actually 19,000 vulcanite blocks that are being output. So that's just one way that you could use this sort of thing. So the last thing we need to talk about is an arithmetic combinator. An arithmetic combinator basically takes what is the input, does math on it somehow, and then outputs the result. So in this case, we're going to connect it up to this constant combinator again, just to show an easy example, okay? So let's connect it up to the input, and then we'll connect up the output. And we have vulcanite blocks coming in and cryonite rods coming in, okay? Let's say that for some reason we want to add 50 to the vulcanite blocks, all right? And I will show an example where I do exactly this, okay? And then I want to output the vulcanite blocks. You should see here that we're going to have 150 because we're taking 100, we're adding 50, and you can see right here that we have 150 blocks. Now, this is very important for a couple different things, which I'll show, but the arithmetic combinator is very, very powerful. So this is a basic overview of circuits themselves, and now we're going to get into different launch triggers and how to decide what those launch triggers should be. So let's go over here, and actually there goes our rocket right now. We're going to first talk about the main rocket that you're going to be sending up to orbit. Now, you can have, all sorts of different combinations of rockets and things like that being sent up. But when you're first starting, you're going to have probably just one rocket silo that is sending up everything that you need in outer space. So we're going to talk about that, okay? And let's work from orbit back here, okay? So let's come up to orbit. And up here, as I noted before, we have our constant combinators, okay? And these things are hooked up. It's kind of hard to see here, okay? But these things are both hooked up to this decider combinator. Now, This decider combinator is doing a couple things, okay? So this decider combinator is also hooked up to this arithmetic combinator. And let me see if I can explain this correctly. Okay, so these are all positive values, right? So let's just do a quick example. We need 1.2 thousand automation tech cards up here, okay? And we have in here, if we mouse over this, you can see we have 1.2 thousand tech cards. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want another 1,200 tech cards being sent up when we don't need them, okay? You know, because that would start to overflow the system and you'd end up with way too many items up here. So you want to keep the values constant, but the issue is that you have to subtract what's in here from what you're requesting, okay? So these are the requested values, and what they do is this arithmetic combinator here uses a cool little value called each. And what that means is that, as you can see here, it evaluates the condition or performs the operation on all input signals. So right here, if we mouse over this electric pole, you can see these are all the different values of items that are up in outer space right now. And that's connected up to all of our warehouses. Well, I guess it's not connected to this one, which it should be. But it's connected up to our warehouses. And it is reading all the contents of those warehouses. Then it is multiplying each by -1, which will give you the negative version of that number, and then outputting them all again. So I hope that makes sense. It's basically taking all of the positive values that are on this electric pole, negating them, and then outputting them. So if we mouse over this, you can see over there the output signals, there are a lot of negative values. And those negative values are what we're going to then be needing up in outer space. Or not needing, I guess. Right? So those are the values of things that we already have. So then over here, what we do is both of these circuits, right? So these constant combinators and the output of this arithmetic combinator are connected up to our decider combinator. Now our decider combinator then, when the signals combine, they automatically get added. So if I have signals coming from one decider that are 300 and another set of signals coming from over here that match up that are 200, when I add them to the input, like right here, it would be 500. Or in this case, like let's say 300 and -200, it would be 100. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So what we're doing here is we're saying each is greater than 0, meaning that when we take the positive numbers of what we want, and we take the negative numbers of all the things that are in our warehouses up here, and we subtract them, we want to output everything that we still need, everything that's still greater than 0, and we're going to output the amount of those things that we need. Then we're taking the output of this, and you can see right here, these are all the values of the things that we're requesting up in outer space and exactly how many we need. So as they get used, these numbers over here will continue increasing until they get resupplied. And then we're sending them down with a signal transmitter down to novice, okay, which is where we'll pick up. So now we're down here, and this is the receiver that's receiving those values, and you can see right here, those are the exact same signals of what I was just showing up in outer space. So these are all of the things that we are requesting. Now it's going to start to get a little bit more complicated because over here we have to do a couple things. Number one, we have to make sure that we're subtracting the things from what's already loaded into the rocket silo from what's requested, right? So we have the number of things requested, and we also have things that we've already loaded. So we need to subtract those. Secondly, we also need to make sure that we're figuring out when we actually want to launch, right? We have to launch at some point. So we need to have both of those things figured out here. So the first thing that we're doing when the signal is coming down is we're doing another arithmetic combinator, and we're again negating everything that we need from outer space, okay? So this gives us, as you can see here in the output signals, it gives us negative values of everything that we need in outer space. Then we have coming in over here positive values from our cargo rocket silo. So you can see here we have inputs from two places. We have the negative values coming in from outer space, and we have positive values from the cargo rocket silo. Meaning that the difference will be taken so that eventually the number in the cargo rocket silo and what's in outer space will both equal each other, and it will be 0. I hope that makes some sense. So here, we're outputting everything that is less than 0, and we're outputting the count. So what that means is that we are outputting everything that we still need from outer space that hasn't yet been satisfied by adding it to the cargo rocket silo. Okay, so this will have, and you can see here, the output values are like quickly changing because we keep loading more things into the cargo rocket silo. But you'll see the output signals are negative values, and those are the items that we still need to load up in order to take to outer space. And the reason that they keep being, they keep changing so quickly is that we keep loading more things into the silo as they're needed. Now, this mess of decider combinators over here is basically just to take these values, these negative values, okay? So let's look at an example. Chemical tech cards are less than 0. We output 1 chemical tech card. Now, it seems like kind of weird, right? But basically, when the output signals from here are negative, meaning that we still need that item, right? So less than 0, we're going to output 1, and then we're going to connect it up to a filter inserter. And one of the modes of operation of filter inserters is that you can set the filters on it. So basically, when this item is needed, we're going to output the item that we need, and that's going to set the filter on this, which will start it inserting into the cargo rocket silo until it becomes satisfied, right? Which will then turn off this signal because it will be satisfied, which will turn this off, which will stop it from inserting. So I hope that kind of cycle makes sense. And we do that for all of our items, okay? There are cleaner ways to do this, but this is working currently for me. And it's, not really worth tearing down at the moment. So that is loading the cargo rocket. Now we have to talk about how do we figure out when we need to launch the cargo rocket, okay? So over here I have my launch deciders, and they're different for all of my different rockets. This one is a little bit unique because we have so many different items that we're loading, okay? And we'll talk about the other ones as well. So this right here is looking at the inputs from the things that are being requested from outer space. And it says everything, okay? So as you can see here, everything means if all input signals meet the condition, it will output true. It is true when there are no inputs, okay? So I say when everything is greater than or equal to 0, then we output 1 green signal. What this means is that, right, so remember, we have this over here. When things are less than 0, that means we still need to load them into the rocket, okay? But when they're greater than or equal to 0, that means that the request has been fulfilled. So basically what this is saying is when all of the requests have been filled, then we'll be ready to go. And here, this one is saying, so cargo rockets, if you come to Informatron, they have a signal E of empty slots or F of full slots. They also have some other interesting things that we'll talk about here. But I'm using E, which is the amount of empty slots, and I'm saying empty is less than 300, meaning that we want to make sure that we're not just sending the cargo rocket up with like 3 things in it. We want to make sure that we're making good use of our liquid rocket fuel, our rocket parts, and the time spent going up and coming back and all of that. Plus, I mean, that takes a lot of resources. So we're going to have at least 200 slots filled up because there are 500 slots in a rocket silo. We're going to have at least 200 slots filled up before we give an okay to launch. And then finally, we have one last decider that says when green is equal to 2, then we output 1 more green. Okay, so it takes those 2 conditions. It makes sure, number 1, is everything fulfilled? Number 2, do we have a bunch of stuff in the rocket silo? If yes, then we're good to launch. And just launch, I have it on launch on green signal when fuel full. So that is the decider combinator on our main rocket, which is a bit more complicated than some of our other rockets. So I hope that makes sense. Again, if you guys have questions, either join the Discord or ask in the comments below, and I will get back to you on whatever questions you have. So the last thing that I wanted to cover are the launch triggers that I use for all of my outposting rockets. Now, they're all pretty much the exact same. And then we also over here have some logic that's figuring out exactly how much solid rocket fuel that we should be inserting into each of the rockets in order to bring the rocket back. So the basic idea behind this is we want to figure out exactly how much stuff we need in order to send over to get a rocket to come back successfully, assuming that it lands safely, of course. So that's what our main triggers are about. So this one right here is checking cargo rocket sections are greater than or equal to 184. And if that is the case, then we output one green signal. Now, it's looking inside the cargo rocket silo here. And as you can see right here, this has off to the side it has 84 rocket sections, and then of course there's 100 that are the rocket is made up of 100 sections. So between the two, that's 184, and that is the minimum amount of rocket sections that we need in order to come back. Secondly, there is a signal coming in from the other planet. There is quite a few here actually, but one of them is checking right here. Is cargo rocket not equal to 1? Okay, and so this signal is hooked up to the rocket silo on the other side, so we can go look at that over here. So we're hooked up to the silo that it's sending right here, and since there is a rocket built in here, if we come into Informatron, you can see a couple of those signals that we are going to be looking at. So we have the number of empty slots as I showed earlier, but then we have a cargo rocket signal, so that is if a rocket is complete inside the silo. Space capsule, cargo rocket sections, and liquid rocket fuel. Our main focus right here though is the cargo rocket signal, which is showing that there's a rocket that was already built on the other side. So we don't want to continue sending rockets over if there's already one waiting to come back. Otherwise, we might just flood rocket sections over there, and it'll end up having to bring all of them back, and it'll waste trips over there basically. So that is what this is checking. Is there not a rocket in that silo? And if there is not a rocket in the silo, then it outputs green, as in we're ready to go. Our last condition has to do with rocket fuel, and we'll look at that here in just a second, but basically it's saying, have we inserted enough rocket fuel into our rocket silo? And if so, then again, we will output one green. So if this is output a green, this is output a green, and this is output a green, meaning we have 3 green signals, right? So green is equal to 3. Then we output one more green signal, which goes to our rocket silo and tells our rocket that it's good to launch. And we have here, launch on green signal when fuel full. So that is all good. So the last thing that we want to look at is this set of decider combinators over here. And the idea behind this is it wants to figure out dynamically how much rocket fuel we need in order to get a rocket to come back from the other planet. So right here, this signal comes in, and it is, also, as I said, it is hooked up to the rocket silo over there. And if we just look at this one more time, one of the other signals was L, which is liquid rocket fuel required for all potential destinations. So if we look at this, that would be this number here, 60,090, right? And if we look at the signals, in the red signals there, you'll see 60,000. So we're reading L coming from the other planet, and it's right there at the top. It is, sorry, that's 21,000. That's like the 5th signal there, I think. 21,000, okay? So this is an arithmetic combinator, and if we look over here, the amount of liquid rocket fuel it takes is directly proportional to solid rocket fuel. One solid rocket fuel makes 50 liquid rocket fuel. So we can take the amount of liquid rocket fuel that we need and divide it by 50 in order to get the amount of solid rocket fuel that we need. So I hope that makes sense. We're taking liquid, dividing by 50, getting solid rocket fuel out. This is outputting that number. Then we come here and I add a buffer of 200. We're also using solid rocket fuel for a few other things over there, like it's powering the train that's going back and forth and things like that. And if I go over there, I want some extra rocket fuel probably. So we're just sending a buffer of 200 here. And then we're outputting M. Then where M is going is it's coming here, and it is being subtracted from the amount of rocket fuel, it's subtracting the amount of rocket fuel that is inside our cargo rocket here. So we take M, which is our buffered amount of solid rocket fuel that we need, and then we subtract out the rocket fuel that's in our cargo rocket silo to get a remainder. And then let's say that remainder is greater than 0, which it is here. As you can see, it's 161. We then do the exact same thing, but we subtract the amount of rocket fuel that's on the other side, like on the other planet already. So we're reading values of rocket fuel coming in from that planet. And as you can see off to the side that it is 162. So we then take M, which output from here is 161. We subtract the 162 that is on the other side, and then we output M, which in this case is going to be -1 because we've fulfilled the amount of rocket fuel that we need. So this is checking, is rocket fuel greater than 0? All right. And that comes from here then. So we say M is greater than or equal to rocket fuel, basically meaning we still need it. Then we output 1 rocket fuel. And so if we're outputting 1 rocket fuel, that means we still need some. So we are checking here, rocket fuel greater than 0. If it is, then we're going to continue inserting. And over here, we check, is it less than or equal to 0, meaning that it's been completely satisfied. And that's what this condition does for the launch triggers. So that is all that we're doing for each of our, we're doing it for each of our outposting rockets. And that is pretty much it for, honestly, all of my rockets. There are probably a few differences on some of the other planets, but these are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about as you're coming up with the way that you want to launch your rocket, deciding the different triggers that you want, and figuring out, when you want it to go, when you want it to come back, how much stuff you want on it. These are all the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about as you're setting up your rockets. And it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Mine certainly were not perfect the first time. I've iterated on this, and it's taken me a while to come up with this exact set of triggers. And yours might be different. Yours might have more triggers here that, you're checking other things. You might have other resources that you're sending, things like that you want to make sure that you have on your rocket before you send it. So this is not a definitive overview. This is a good idea of the things that you need to be thinking about as you're setting up your rockets and the triggers for them. So that is going to be it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It would be awesome if you did, if you would leave a like on the video. And if you learned something too, it would be awesome if you guys could give me a subscribe. It would really help the channel out. And I will see you all out there with your rockets. Best of luck to you.